Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. When we think about South Asia, there's a pretty common assumption that often comes up, isn't there?
Hmm.
We tend to see India as, this vibrant democracy,
Right.
and then Pakistan and Bangladesh, they often get labeled as more authoritarian, maybe prone to military rule. It feels like a very clear, sort of black and white picture.
And that's exactly the assumption we're going to unpack today in our deep dive.
Okay.
Our sources, especially the really extensive work by Ayesha Jalal, suggest this simple picture isn't quite the full story.
Right.
What's really fascinating, I think, is this idea that beneath the surface, there's actually, well, more shared authoritarianism than you might expect.
Sheer authoritarianism, that's interesting.
Yeah, and even what Jalal calls a paradoxical convergence in their political paths.
Okay, paradoxical convergence. So our mission today is to explore how India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, they all share this British colonial history, obviously, but took quite different routes after independence.
Initially, yes.
But then, and this is the surprising part, they started showing signs of, well, converging politically. We're going to look at the period from 1947 up to about 1993.
Focusing on state structures, politics, societal dynamics, the whole picture.
Exactly. Get ready for maybe a surprising journey through history.
Absolutely. And to really get it, we have to start at the beginning with that colonial legacy. It really does endure.
Right. Partition in 1947. Beyond the horrific human cost, it left deep scars, didn't it? Administratively, economically.
Strategically, too. Think about it. India, okay, it lost key agricultural areas, jute, cotton, and faced this huge task of resettling millions, integrating hundreds of princely states.
About 562 of them.
Exactly. But crucially, it inherited the main structure of the colonial government, the center, and a more developed industrial base.
That's a huge difference from the get-go. Compare that to Pakistan.
Yeah, Pakistan started out with only, 17.5% of the financial assets?
And just 30% of the undivided army.
So immense strategic vulnerabilities right from day one. It's like starting a race way behind the starting line.
Definitely.
And here's a really fundamental point. The British had set up what's called an essentially unitary state structure.
Meaning very centralized?
Very centralized, yeah. Power flows from the top. And they were masters at playing central control against regional demands, nationalism against, communal divisions.
Manipulating those tensions.
Precisely.
Mm.
And this powerful system, it didn't have a formal separation between the bureaucrats, the civil service, and the political leaders.
So that concentration of power was sort of baked in.
It really was. It laid the groundwork for highly concentrated power.
So this idea of bureaucratic authoritarianism, it was almost like their birthright.
In a way, yes. The colonial state relied heavily on these powerful civil servants and local intermediaries to maintain control.
Right.
And even when they introduced reforms, like the Morley Minto ones back in 1909,
Yeah.
they cleverly used things like separate electorates, say for Muslims, which directed political energy towards local issues, local spoils.
Keeping the center strong.
Exactly, keeping the unitary center firmly in British hands. It created this structural contradiction, made real political unity very difficult.
And it wasn't just structures, it was ideas, too.
Absolutely. That Western colonial idea of indivisible sovereignty, the notion that ultimate power resides in one single central point.
That survived partition.
Ironically, yes. Both India and Pakistan adopted this kind of thinking at the top. And this deeply shaped how the center dealt with the regions, fostering those authoritarian strains we see later.
Okay, so that's the inherited blueprint. How did they then start building their own houses, so to speak? Those first few decades after 47 must have been crucial.
Hugely crucial.
Yeah.
And this is where the paths really seem to diverge, at least on the surface.
Right. India looked like a formal democracy.
It did. The Congress Party, which already had a strong nationwide presence before independence,
Inherited that central machinery.
yes, and they focused immediately on consolidating central authority, bringing those princely states into the Indian Union.
And there was something called the Nehruvian Veil.
Right. That refers to Prime Minister Nehru's policy of non-alignment in the Cold War.
Okay.
Now, India actually received a lot of U.S. aid, significantly more than Pakistan in the early years.
Over $3 billion by 1961 compared to $1.4 billion for Pakistan.
Exactly. But non-alignment helped minimize the direct political interference of the Cold War superpowers in India's internal affairs, gave them breathing room.
That's a really key difference. Our sources talk about a qualitatively different balance of power in India.
Because regular elections did happen, which emphasized the role of politics.
But there's always a but.
Well, the alliance between the political leadership, Congress, and the powerful civil service, the IAS, the Indian Administrative Service, that was crucial
For keeping control.
for maintaining continuity, enforcing the center's decisions, even where Congress itself wasn't that strong locally.
But that system also had downsides, right? Patronage, corruption.
Definitely. The Congress patronage system, handing out jobs and favors, led to opportunism, corruption. It sort of undermined the substance of democracy, even if the form was there.
And what about the military in India?
Critically important. Civilian control over the military was asserted quite firmly.
By figures like Krishna Menon.
Yes, the defense minister from 1957. He made sure politicians stayed in charge. Now, there was pushback sometimes from the military, the bureaucracy. It showed these institutions weren't perfectly neutral.
But the principle held.
By 1962, civilian control was pretty well established. A huge contrast to Pakistan.
Right. Let's talk about Pakistan's journey then. It took a dramatically different turn.
Dramatically different. It's quite striking. It took Pakistan 24 years to hold its first proper general election.
1970, why so long?
Well, basically, legislative bodies, courts, they were systematically undermined, which ironically strengthened central authority but weakened the already fragile political parties.
And the military's role.
It grew steadily. By 1951, the military was arguably dominant, but they kept up a kind of parliamentary facade for a few more years.
Until 1958.
Until October 1958.
Yeah.
Fearing what might happen in the planned 59 elections, the Army High Command, along with key civil servants, just took direct control.
A coup.
Effectively, yes.
Yeah.
And that institutional shift power, moving decisively to the military and bureaucracy, that really stuck. It shaped Pakistan for decades.
And economically, under Ayub Khan, his basic democracies.
That system centralized bureaucratic control even further. Senior officials were openly rewarded land grants, licenses,
Perks of power.
big perks. But it completely failed to redistribute wealth or empower ordinary people.
Which caused resentment.
Huge resentment, especially in East Pakistan, which felt politically ignored and economically exploited. This directly fueled movements like the Awami League and their demands for autonomy.
Which brings us into the 1970s, a really turbulent decade, described in our sources as a populist interlude.
Yeah, it was happening globally, too. States were intervening more. Mass politics was broadening, challenging old power structures.
And leaders responded with populism.
Often, yes. Appealing directly to the masses, bypassing traditional elites. Think of Indira Gandhi in India.
Right, the Garibi Hataao.
Remove poverty. She skillfully outmaneuvered the old guard in Congress, this syndicate.
Launched left-leaning policies.
Bank nationalization.
Yeah.
Abolishing privy purses for the princes. Big symbolic moves. And that slogan won her a massive two-thirds majority in 71. The promise felt huge.
But the reality.
The reality, as our sources detail, is much tougher. That populist agenda ran up against these very resilient old rural power structures, dominant castes and classes.
So change was hard.
Very hard. And Mrs. Gandhi, apparently fearing strong regional leaders who might challenge her, started abandoning internal party democracy.
Appointing leaders from the top.
Yes, leading to what's called personalized rule and the politics of deinstitutionalization, weakening the very institutions of democracy.
Which ultimately led to the emergency.
That period of overt authoritarianism, yeah. Though voters rejected it firmly in the 1977 election.
But she came back in 1980.
She did, but the populism was toned down. There were moves towards market liberalization after 82.
Yet the central interference continued.
Oh, yes. Central meddling in state affairs, brazen manipulation of party factions. Ironically, this actually fueled the rise of strong regional parties.
Interesting. So while India had its populist wave, what about Pakistan? Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and his socialist rhetoric?
While there are definitely parallels with Indira Gandhi, Bhutto also swept in with big promises, also personalized power.
But did the underlying structure change?
Our sources say only marginal change after 1971, after Bangladesh broke away. That fundamental institutional imbalance, military and bureaucracy on top, remained.
What about his land reforms in 72? Weren't they meant to be radical?
The rhetoric was radical, yes. But the laws had loopholes. Big loopholes that actually benefited the existing large landlords in many cases. Only about 1% of landless tenants actually got land directly.
So not much real redistribution.
Not much. And the Green Revolution in Pakistan, like in India, boosting food output, actually ended up sharpening the economic differences, made the rich richer.
And then there's the third piece, Bangladesh. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman.
Right, newly independent Bangladesh. Mujib initially tried parliamentary democracy, populist economic moves like nationalization.
But faced huge problems.
Immense problems: economic stagnation, internal dissent, external shocks like the '74 famine, worsened by the oil crisis.
So he shifted course.
You did. He created a personal paramilitary force, the Iraqi Bahini, and moved towards a one-party state, Baksal,
Which our sources call.
a crumbling house of cards. It didn't last. His assassination in 1975 brought in military rule.
So looking back at this populist phase across all three countries,
It really feels like a mirage, as the analysis suggests.
promises of change, but
But ultimately, these movements often ended up reinforcing the underlying authoritarian tendencies within their state structures. It was like running furiously just to stay in the same place.
which leads us to this really counterintuitive idea for the 1990s, the paradox of convergence.
Exactly, or democratic authoritarianism.
How does that apply to India, which was still formally democratic?
Well, India started relying more heavily on non-elected institutions.
The bureaucracy, police, even the military.
Yes, partly because the Congress Party's dominance was fading, its support base eroding.
And other parties were rising.
The BJP, various regional parties. This profoundly challenged that earlier secular Congress-dominated model.
And economic liberalization played a role.
It did. The benefits were unevenly distributed, favoring some groups over others. This contributed to social tensions and what our sources call the communalization of state institutions, meaning that things like communal riots weren't just sporadic outbreaks anymore. They started becoming more like vicious and organized pogroms, sometimes with the state appearing complicit or at least ineffective.
That's a stark picture. Meanwhile, Pakistan and Bangladesh, they started having elections more regularly by then.
They did. Think of Benazir Bhutto coming to power in Pakistan in '88. But
the elections didn't change the fundamentals.
precisely, they didn't fundamentally alter those historic institutional imbalances. Military dominance, especially in Pakistan, remained a huge factor. Disproportionate defense spending still overshadowed development.
So their politics were still sort of hostage.
Hostage to highly inequitable state structures, as our source puts it.
So that simple dichotomy we started with, democratic India, authoritarian neighbors, it really breaks down.
It collapses, really, when you look closely at the structures and processes.
Yeah.
You see more shadowy areas of difference and similarity than of flagrant contrast.
India's democratic authoritarianism.
Finds parallels in the paradoxical achievement of Pakistan and Bangladesh having elections, but within systems where real power still lies, to a large extent, elsewhere.
Let's shift focus slightly to the economy, because that's another area where they differed, but it also feeds into this convergence story, right?
Absolutely. India pursued what you could call a development economy.
Under Nehruvian socialism.
Well, the ideology was socialist, but the reality was more of a mixed economy. It supported private enterprise alongside a large public sector.
And the main goal was?
The focus was really on production and capital accumulation, building up industry, rather than immediate, wide-scale redistribution of wealth.
And the results were mixed.
Very mixed. Definite successes: industrial diversification, the Green Revolution boosting food grains, but also clear failures.
Like land reform.
Effective agrarian reforms largely failed. They tended to benefit the middle to rich peasants, not the truly landless.
And in corruption.
Yes, what our sources term institutionalized corruption became embedded in the centralized planning system. And the subsidy raj for agriculture emerged from this era, too.
Then later, India moved towards liberalization, starting around 1991.
Right, deregulation, opening up markets, aiming to spur industrial growth.
But that had trade-offs.
It did, often at the cost of social welfare spending. And it potentially led to heightened conflict because the benefits weren't evenly spread. The state's ability to provide safety nets was reduced.
Okay, so that's India's development focus. Contrast that sharply with Pakistan and Bangladesh.
Which operated more like defense economies.
Meaning?
In Pakistan, for example, defense and just running the government consistently ate up over 3/4 of the central revenue budget in the early decades.
3/4. Leaving.
Little for development, as the analysis states bluntly. Pakistan's defense spending as a percentage of GDP was far higher than India's 6.3% versus 3.5%.
And this defense focus wasn't just budget numbers, it shaped the power structure.
Totally. Military regimes in Pakistan explicitly use state resources to reward the military brass.
Oh.
Top government jobs, big land grants, lucrative defense contracts, business licenses. The military translated its political dominance directly into economic entrenchment.
And land reform in Pakistan.
Unlike India, where reforms at least created a new class of landowners, in Pakistan, the big landowners, especially in Punjab and Sindh, successfully resisted most effective land reforms.
So the Green Revolution there.
It increased output, yes, but it further sharpened inequalities, benefiting those who already had land and resources.
Wow. So connecting this back, these fundamental economic choices really reinforced the different types of governance, didn't they?
Absolutely. One prioritized development, with all its flaws. The others prioritized defense, embedding military power deep within the state and economy.
Okay, let's turn to another recurring theme. That tension between the central government and regional dissent.
A huge ongoing issue across all three countries.
Yeah.
And our sources argue it's not just about cultural diversity.
It's about the state structure itself.
Largely, yes. Those unitary structures inherited from the British, imposed from the top down.
So in India, this showed up as federal friction.
Right. Even with things like reorganizing states along linguistic lines. India promised it, but initially resisted.
Nehru wasn't keen.
He actually equated linguistic federalists with terrorists, communists, and religious communalists. Strong words.
But they eventually created linguistic states.
They did, like for Punjabi speakers or Telugu speakers. But ironically, while it was a concession, it also accentuated regional sentiments rather than resolving them entirely.
And then there's Kashmir, a really difficult, long-running issue.
Extremely difficult. Our sources talk about the myth of Jammu and Kashmir's special constitutional status.
Man.
Because New Delhi progressively eroded its autonomy over the years, jailing leaders like Sheikh Abdullah back in '53, extending central laws, stripping financial autonomy.
Leading to?
Eventually to a popular armed insurgency breaking out after 1989. And it's important to note, many Kashmiris involved weren't necessarily seeking to join Pakistan, but often independence.
Okay, shifting to Pakistan, its federalism was even more strained.
Much more fractured, yes.
Yeah.
Those centralizing tendencies were even starker. Remember the one-unit system from 1955?
Which ignored linguistic differences in West Pakistan.
Exactly, and it really deepened the alienation felt by Bengalis in East Pakistan, contributing to the eventual split.
And post-71 Pakistan, Punjabi dominance remained an issue.
A major issue. Punjabis constitute nearly 60% of the population and dominate the military, about 70% of personnel in the federal bureaucracy.
And no system for balancing that power.
No real system of weighted representation was put in place to give the smaller provinces, like Sindh or Baluchistan, a fair share of power.
You mentioned Sindh, described as a boiling cauldron.
Yes, due to the large influx of migrants, Muhajirs, Pathans, Punjabis, which actually made native Sindhis a minority in their own province.
Leading to conflict.
Serious conflict. The Sindhi uprising in '83, the rise of the MQM representing Muhajirs in cities like Karachi, these were deeply political and economic conflicts, not just simple ethnic clashes.
And Baluchistan, Pakistan's largest province.
Faced and still faces extreme neglect, shockingly low literacy rates, massive underdevelopment.
Despite having resources.
Huge resources.
Yeah.
Supplies about 80% of Pakistan's natural gas, but historically received minimal royalties. Even development projects were often defense-related, reinforcing central control, not benefiting locals.
Okay, let's peel back one more layer. The ideological masks and societal mosaics. The battle over identity.
Right. Starting with India and caste. Our sources make an interesting point. The idea of one single Indian caste system across the whole country. That was largely a late 19th century colonial reinvention.
A colonial construct.
In its singular pan-Indian form, yes. But that's not to deny reality. A very real caste and class nexus absolutely exists, social discrimination tied to economic status.
And India tried to address this with protective discrimination, affirmative action.
Yes, reserving government jobs, seats in legislatures for scheduled castes and tribes, trying to counter historical disadvantage.
But these policies had complex effects.
They did. Paradoxically, they sometimes reinforce caste identities. They often clash with the ideal of pure equality of opportunity. And the benefits didn't always reach the most disadvantaged within those groups. Plus, implementation varied hugely across regions.
Stronger in the south, more conflict in the north.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Showing that complex interplay of caste, class, and regional politics.
Now, compare that to Pakistan. No real caste system in the same way, but
But you have powerful, local, clan-based social networks. The Baradari. These maintain significant political influence even under military rule.
And religion's role, despite being an Islamic republic.
Interestingly, religion was often not the main driver in local politics. Local power calculations were more about these clan networks, patronage, and so on.
So there was a disconnect.
A disconnect between the state trying to impose a kind of monolithic Islamic ideology from the top.
And how people actually lived and practiced their faith.
Exactly. The multifaceted and frequently unorthodox practices of Muslims at local and regional levels often didn't fit neatly into the state's official box.
Language was another battleground, wasn't it?
Definitely. Trying to impose a single national language, Hindi in India, Urdu in Pakistan, was a classic centralizing tactic to forge unity.
But it backfired.
Often, yes. In Pakistan, Urdu wasn't the mother tongue of any major region. Imposing it, especially with the one-unit system, fueled cultural alienation and linguistic regionalism, particularly in non-Punjabi areas.
And what about secularism versus communalism, used as state tools?
Our sources argue neither should be seen as rigid ideologies. They're often used pragmatically, strategically.
How so in India? Formerly secular,
But showed extraordinary pragmatic tolerance towards caste and communal thinking when it suited them. Sometimes even used communal factors like Rajiv Gandhi's handling of anti-Sikh violence, or a later shift towards implicit Hindu chauvinism to try and cut the losses of declining electoral support.
And the Babri Mosque destruction in '92?
That was a watershed moment. The state's perceived complicitous role really shattered the aura of a democratic and secular India for many.
And in Pakistan, its Islamic ideology.
It's been an uncertain resource at best, according to the analysis. Regimes invoked Islam for legitimacy, sure, but they constantly struggled to define what that meant in practice and how to manage religious leaders, a constant balancing act.
And throughout all this, minorities suffered.
Tragically, yes. That gap between the idea of nationhood, especially Muslim nationhood, and the reality of statehood left minorities in all three countries vulnerable, often facing accusations of disloyalty.
So let's bring this all together. We started with that simple idea: India the democracy, Pakistan and Bangladesh the authoritarian states.
And that distinction just, well, it collapses under scrutiny, doesn't it?
It seems so. All three, in their own ways, show features of this democratic authoritarianism.
Rooted deeply in that shared colonial legacy's centralized power, the idea of indivisible sovereignty.
It really makes you think, despite having elections, despite different official ideologies, secularism, socialism, Islam,
The underlying institutional imbalances, the deep-seated power dynamics, have consistently blocked the emergence of truly substantive democracy and equitable development.
it leaves us with a challenging question, doesn't it? If these colonial structures and ideologies are still hindering real transformation,
How can the people of South Asia actually prise open these contrived ideological monoliths? How can they foster a collective spirit that reflects their own incredible diversity, their historic multiplicities?
what would it really take, you wonder, for these nations to finally move beyond the long shadow of partition towards futures that are genuinely more inclusive and fair for everyone?
That's the big question, isn't it? Something profound for us all to think about.